There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew becomes uncertain in an instant. For Lena, that moment arrived on an ordinary Tuesday evening, wrapped in the soft glow of her phone screen and the silence of a house that suddenly felt too large. She had spent years building what she believed was a secure foundation, a marriage rooted in trust, a home filled with love, a daughter who brought light into every corner of their lives. But on this particular night, as she sat alone in her living room while her husband Marcus claimed to be working late yet again, something inside her shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was subtle, like the first crack in a dam that holds back years of unspoken questions. Trust is a strange thing. We give it freely to the people closest to us, and we rarely question it until we have a reason to. Lena had never been the suspicious type. She wasn't the wife who checked phone records or demanded explanations for every delayed text message. She believed in the life they had created together, in the routine they had fallen into over the years. But routines, as comforting as they can be, also have a way of hiding what we don't want to see. And when her phone buzzed that night with a motion alert from the camera upstairs, the one she had installed months ago for peace of mind, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite fear, but something close to it. A quiet dread that wrapped itself around her chest and made her realize that the ordinary can become extraordinary in the space of a single notification. There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew becomes uncertain in an instant. For Lena, that moment arrived on an ordinary Tuesday evening, wrapped in the soft glow of her phone screen and the silence of a house that suddenly felt too large. She had spent years building what she believed was a secure foundation, a marriage rooted in trust, a home filled with love, a daughter who brought light into every corner of their lives. But on this particular night, as she sat alone in her living room while her husband Marcus claimed to be working late yet again, something inside her shifted. It wasn't dramatic at first. It was subtle, like the first crack in a dam that holds back years of unspoken questions. Trust is a strange thing. We give it freely to the people closest to us, and we rarely question it until we have a reason to. Lena had never been the suspicious type. She wasn't the wife who checked phone records or demanded explanations for every delayed text message. She believed in the life they had created together, in the routine they had fallen into over the years. But routines, as comforting as they can be, also have a way of hiding what we don't want to see. And when her phone buzzed that night with a motion alert from the camera upstairs, the one she had installed months ago for peace of mind, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not quite fear, but something close to it. A quiet dread that wrapped itself around her chest and made her realize that the ordinary can become extraordinary in the space of a single notification. The truth is, the signs had been there for weeks. Lena just hadn't wanted to see them. Her daughter Mia, who used to race through the house with boundless energy, had become a shadow of herself. Bedtime, once a peaceful ritual of stories and lullabies, had turned into something Mia resisted with tears and trembling hands. She would cling to her mother's arm and beg her not to leave, not to turn off the light, not to close the door all the way. At first, Lena brushed it off as a developmental phase. Children go through stages, don't they? They have nightmares. They develop fears that seem irrational to adults but feel overwhelming to them. So Lena comforted her daughter, stroked her hair, and promised that everything was safe. But even as she spoke those words, a small voice inside her wondered if she was trying to convince Mia or herself. The drawings started appearing around the same time. Mia had always loved to draw, bright, cheerful scenes of families holding hands under oversized suns. But now, the pages were filled with something different. Stick figures with wide, frightened eyes. Dark scribbles that covered entire corners of the paper. And in one drawing that Lena found tucked under the kitchen table, a small figure hiding beneath a bed while a larger shadow loomed in the doorway. When Lena asked Mia about it, her daughter's face went pale, and she refused to speak. She just shook her head and walked away, leaving Lena standing there with the paper trembling in her hands. How do you interpret a child's fear when they can't put it into words? How do you know when to worry and when to let it go? Then there were the patterns Lena couldn't ignore, no matter how hard she tried. Marcus had always worked demanding hours, but lately, his late nights had become more frequent. And on those evenings when he texted to say he wouldn't be home until after 9 or 10, Mia's anxiety would spike. She would pace the hallway, glancing toward the stairs as if expecting something terrible to emerge from the shadows. She flinched at ordinary sounds, the creak of a floorboard, the hum of the heating system, even the word night spoken in casual conversation. Lena watched her daughter shrink into herself, and with each passing day, she felt her own sense of control slipping through her fingers like sand. She told herself it was nothing, that she was overthinking, that exhaustion and stress were making her paranoid. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to acknowledge, she knew something was wrong. The question that haunted her wasn't whether something was happening. It was what was happening during those late nights when Marcus wasn't home and Mia was too terrified to sleep. The night that changed everything arrived without warning, disguised as just another ordinary evening. Lena's phone lit up with the familiar message from Marcus. Running behind at work. Won't be home until late. Don't wait up. She had read those words dozens of times before. But this time, something about them felt different. Maybe it was the way Mia reacted when Lena told her daddy wouldn't be home for bedtime. Her daughter's face crumpled, and she grabbed Lena's hand with a desperate grip that left small crescents in her mother's skin. Please don't go to sleep, Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. Please stay awake tonight. The plea was so raw, so filled with genuine terror, that Lena felt her heart crack open. She pulled her daughter close and promised she would stay awake, that she would keep watch, that nothing bad would happen. But even as she made that promise, she wondered what exactly she was protecting Mia from. Hours passed in uneasy silence. Lena tucked Mia into bed, left the hallway light on, and retreated downstairs with her phone clutched in her hand. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting just beneath the surface of their ordinary life, ready to break through. Out of habit more than intention, she opened the home security app and began scrolling through the evening's notifications. Most were mundane, shadows triggered by passing headlights, the movement of tree branches outside. But then she saw a timestamp that made her freeze. 8:47 in the evening. A notification from the front door camera. Someone entering the house. Her breath caught in her throat as she tapped the video, and the world seemed to tilt sideways. There, on her screen, was Marcus. Not at work, not running late, but walking through their front door more than an hour ago, moving with careful, deliberate quietness. Lena's hands trembled as she scrolled forward through the footage. She watched her husband remove his shoes, glance around the empty first floor, and then climb the stairs. The hallway camera caught him pausing at the top, looking left toward their bedroom, then right toward Mia's room. And then, with a slow, almost hesitant motion, he turned the handle to their daughter's door and slipped inside. The timestamp read 8:52. Mia should have been asleep. The house should have been quiet. And Marcus, according to his own text message, shouldn't have been home at all. Lena stared at the frozen frame, her mind racing through 1,000 possible explanations, each one darker than the last. Why would he lie about being at work? Why would he sneak into their daughter's room in the dark? What was he doing in there while Lena sat downstairs, completely unaware? The questions crashed over her like waves, each one pulling her deeper into a suffocating fear. Betrayal, confusion, and a primal terror for her child's safety twisted together in her chest until she could barely breathe. Everything she thought she knew about her husband, about their life together, about the safety of their home, dissolved in the pale glow of that screen. The decision to install a camera in Mia's room felt like a betrayal of everything Lena had ever believed about marriage and trust. She stood in the doorway of her daughter's bedroom the next afternoon, a small wireless camera hidden in her palm, and felt the weight of what she was about to do press down on her shoulders like a physical burden. This was her husband, the man she had chosen to build a life with, the father of her child. And here she was, preparing to surveil him as if he were a stranger, as if the years they had shared together meant nothing in the face of a growing suspicion. But then she thought of Mia's trembling hands, the fear in her daughter's eyes, the drawings of shadows and hiding figures, and she knew she had no choice. If there was even the smallest chance that her child was in danger, she had to know, even if the truth destroyed everything. even if it meant looking into the eyes of the man she loved and seeing a monster staring back. She positioned the camera on a high shelf, angled toward the bed, disguised among a cluster of stuffed animals. Her hands shook as she tested the connection on her phone, watching the live feed flicker to life with a clarity that made her stomach turn. That evening, Marcus sent another text. Late meeting. Home around 10. Lena read the message 3 times, each word feeling heavier than the last. She kissed Mia goodnight, turned on the hallway light as always, and went downstairs to wait. But this time, she didn't scroll mindlessly through her phone or distract herself with television. She opened the camera app and sat in the dark living room, watching the empty frame of her daughter's bedroom with her heart hammering against her ribs. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound in the house made her flinch. And then, just after 9, she heard it. The front door opening. Footsteps on the stairs. The creak of Mia's bedroom door. The camera captured everything. Marcus entered the room, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the nightlight, and Lena braced herself for the worst. But what she saw on that screen shattered every terrible assumption she had built in her mind. Mia wasn't asleep. She was sitting up in bed, her small body rigid with fear, her breath coming in short, desperate gasps. And Marcus, instead of looming over her or doing anything sinister, knelt beside the bed and took her hands in his. Lena watched, frozen, as her husband began speaking in a low, gentle voice. She couldn't hear the words through the camera's audio, but she could see their effect. He guided Mia through breathing exercises, his chest rising and falling in exaggerated motions that their daughter tried to match. He held her close when her body shook with silent sobs. He read to her from a small book he pulled from his jacket pocket, his finger tracing the words as if teaching her to focus on something beyond her panic. This wasn't danger. This wasn't a threat. This was a father sitting with his daughter through the storms that raged inside her mind, the panic attack she had been too afraid or too ashamed to show her mother. Later, after Marcus finally left Mia's room and drove away again, Lena discovered the rest of the truth. Hidden in his car were pamphlets about childhood anxiety and trauma, receipts for evening workshops on helping children through mental health crises, notes scribbled in his handwriting about grounding techniques and panic response strategies. He had been attending training sessions after work, learning from professionals how to help Mia navigate fears that Lena hadn't even fully understood existed. He had been lying about where he was. Yes, but not to hide something dark. He had been lying to protect Mia's dignity, to give her a safe space to fall apart without judgment, to be the kind of father who showed up in the middle of her worst moments and held her together until she could breathe again. The conversation that followed was one of the hardest Lena had ever experienced. She confronted Marcus the next evening, not with anger but with tears and confusion, showing him the footage she had captured. And instead of defensiveness or shame, she saw something else in his eyes. Relief. He had been carrying this weight alone for months, and the exhaustion of secrecy had carved lines into his face that Lena hadn't noticed until now. He sat across from her at the kitchen table and told her everything. How he had found Mia's drawings weeks before Lena had. How he had heard her screaming in her sleep and rushed to her room to find her trapped in a nightmare so vivid she couldn't distinguish it from reality. How their daughter had clutched his shirt and begged him, through gasping sobs, not to tell Mommy because she didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to make her mother worry more than she already did. Marcus had done what any desperate parent would do. He started searching for answers. Through careful conversations with Mia's teacher, he learned about an incident at school that their daughter had never mentioned. During a game of hide-and-seek, Mia had hidden inside a storage closet. Another child had accidentally locked the door from the outside, trapping her in complete darkness for nearly 20 minutes before a teacher heard her screaming. The school had called it a minor accident, nothing to worry about, and Mia had seemed fine when Marcus picked her up that afternoon. But trauma doesn't always announce itself immediately. It waits. It burrows deep into a child's mind and emerges later in nightmares, in panic attacks, in an overwhelming fear of darkness and closed spaces and being left alone at night. Marcus had recognized the signs, but Mia had made him promise not to involve Lena. She was terrified of being seen as broken, of disappointing her mother, of adding stress to a household that already felt fragile to her young perception. So Marcus made a choice. Instead of breaking his daughter's trust, he decided to become the kind of father who could help her heal. He enrolled in evening workshops on childhood trauma, sitting in rooms with counselors and psychologists while Lena believed he was working late. He learned about grounding techniques, about how to talk a child through a panic attack, about the importance of consistent presence during moments of fear. He read books with titles like Understanding Childhood Anxiety and Helping Your Child Through Trauma, highlighting passages and taking notes in the margins. And every night that Mia's fear became too overwhelming, he came home early, parked down the street, and slipped into the house to sit with her through the worst of it. He was building her confidence slowly, helping her feel safe enough to eventually tell her mother the truth herself, hoping that by the time Lena knew, Mia would already be healing. Understanding the truth didn't erase the guilt that settled over Lena like a heavy fog. She had doubted the man who had been sacrificing sleep and time and peace of mind to protect their daughter. She had installed a camera in their child's room, turned their home into a surveillance system, and allowed her imagination to paint her husband as someone capable of unspeakable things. The weight of those assumptions crushed her in ways she hadn't anticipated. She would catch herself staring at Marcus across the dinner table, wanting to apologize again even though she had already done so a dozen times. But Marcus, in his quiet way, helped her understand that guilt was just another burden they didn't need to carry. He explained that his secrecy hadn't been fair either. He had wanted to spare her the emotional weight, yes, but in doing so, he had excluded her from something fundamental, their daughter's suffering. He had made a unilateral decision about their family's pain, and that, too, had consequences. The path forward became clear when they stopped trying to fix everything alone. Family therapy wasn't something either of them had imagined needing, but it became the foundation on which they rebuilt trust and communication. In a small office with soft lighting and comfortable chairs, they learned to speak about fears they had buried, resentments they hadn't acknowledged, and the ways their individual attempts to protect had actually isolated them from each other. Mia joined them for some sessions, her small voice growing stronger each week as she learned that her fear didn't make her weak and her needs didn't make her a burden. The therapist taught them all a language for expressing what they felt instead of hiding it, and slowly, painfully, beautifully, they began to function as a unit again. The changes didn't happen overnight. Healing rarely does. But over the following weeks and months, small victories emerged like flowers breaking through concrete. Mia's nightmares became less frequent. She stopped flinching at the word night and started sleeping with her door only halfway open instead of demanding every light in the house stay on. She drew pictures again, and this time they were filled with color, families holding hands under bright suns, homes with open doors and windows that let light stream through. Marcus stopped hiding his evening commitments and instead invited Lena to attend some of the workshops with him, transforming his solitary education into something they pursued together. And Lena learned to forgive herself for the suspicions that had nearly torn them apart, recognizing that fear for a child's safety can make even the most rational person lose their way. Communication became their anchor. Openness became their practice. And trust, once shattered, slowly rebuilt itself into something even stronger than before. Lena's story doesn't end with a perfect resolution, because real life rarely offers those. But it does end with something more valuable: understanding. What she learned through those painful weeks of suspicion and revelation is something every parent needs to hear. Our assumptions, however well-intentioned, can become weapons that wound the people we love most. The silence we maintain to protect others often does more harm than the truth ever could. And the emotional struggles our children carry are frequently invisible until we create spaces safe enough for them to be revealed. Lena had believed her home was secure, her family was stable, and her daughter was simply going through a phase. But beneath the surface of ordinary life, a child was drowning in fear, and a father was fighting battles no one else could see. If there's wisdom to be drawn from Lena's experience, it's this: pay attention to the subtle shifts in your children. The drawings that change tone, the sudden resistance to bedtime, the questions they stop asking, and the silences that stretch too long. These aren't always signs of danger, but they are always signs of something worth exploring with patience and compassion. Talk to your children, but more importantly, Listen when they are ready to speak. Create environments where fear isn't shameful and struggle isn't weakness. And remember that the people closest to you, the ones you think you know completely, are often carrying burdens you've never imagined. Communication isn't just important in families. It's everything. It's the bridge between isolation and connection, between assumption and truth, between breaking apart and healing together. Lena and Marcus found their way back to each other, and Mia found her way back to peace because they chose to speak honestly even when it was uncomfortable. That choice is available to all of us every single day. What will you choose?